folks, thanks for stopping by another ADHD video. So for today I wanted to discuss rather an updated version of a video I did prior on ADHD and relationships. Now that video looks a little too lo-fi, a little too low budget, some black and white. It's when I was barely getting comfortable with being in front of the camera, not really playing an instrument but rather talking about more serious matters. So now I have become a lot more comfortable. So I wanted to make a video where we can really discuss in a much more presentable manner some of these implications of which that video discussed upon. We can elaborate and we can learn, because as we know, ADHD has a big impact on our lives. It can totally make our lives a living hell if we don't take care of it. The more I research ADHD, the more I work with people with ADHD, the more I see that when the ADHD itself is not being taken care of, that's when problems really start arising. And it's not the fault always of the individual, rather of the ADHD, as I mentioned before, not being taken care of. So we got to learn about ourselves. We got to learn about the struggle. And it's hard. We have a lot of resentment. We have a lot of wounds. We have a lot of war wounds and things of that nature, so to speak, from growing up and it being tough. Some of us didn't get diagnosed until much later in life. Some of us were blessed and got diagnosed younger, but then perhaps had difficulty with medication and stopped and then came back years later. There's people from all different walks of life. That's the beauty of life. So with this video, I hope it helps you out. I hope you can open your mind. The subject matter we're going to discuss isn't going to be the easiest thing to talk about sometimes. There's going to be a lot of reflecting to do. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of learning too. And with that, we can have a better understanding of ourselves and perhaps what we should do next on our quest and journey in life to improve ourselves and to take hold and to tame the ADHD and not let it dominate us. So with that being said, let's jump to ADHD and relationship problems. I'm going to discuss 12 points. And we're going to elaborate a little bit on each of them. I'm going to try to keep this short and concise. We'll see if it works out. These points are really important, and it's something that in my research I've seen people really struggle with. And like I mentioned before, if we can tame the ADHD, whether that be by getting treatment, medication, supplements, whether that be by getting therapy or counseling or an ADHD coach or anything of that nature, you can do it. A lot of us with ADHD feel like we can't continue, we can't improve, woe is me, and it's just like, no, we can. I truly believe each and every individual can improve in their own capacity and in different ways, because we're all unique and have a unique life and live life the way we do, and we got our pros and we got our cons too, but we got to do something about it, because if we choose to do nothing, expect different results, I'm sorry, but not much might change or is going to change. So let's try to do something little by little. Let's give it a go. So for the first point of discussion here, we see financial problems. One or both partners might be overspending. So it is no secret that people with ADHD, some people with ADHD, have problems with impulsivity, impulse problems. You see something you like, you just want to have it right away. You think of something you want to do, you just want to do it right away, and it's really hard to take that mindset out, because those thoughts become intruding and it becomes the main goal you want to do. And it sucks because of this, unfortunately, some couples or some families have issues with finances because there's either one or both people in the relationship that are not spending accordingly. They're not spending within the limits of their budget and are going over the budget and putting themselves into debt. And unfortunately, that debt can keep building and building. And when it gets so high up, ADHD, one of the struggles we have with ADHD is the follow-up of an activity or something that we're doing. It's really hard for us to do long-term steps sometimes because we lose motivation and we lose concentration. So what ends up happening is the debt keeps building, but in order to create a budget that's going to meet those new standards and things of that nature, we might need to do multiple things. You see where I'm going? It's really hard when the ADHD gives us issues with both impulsivity and both with follow-up. So if this is the case in perhaps you or your significant other's life and you guys seem to be in that much of a struggle, perhaps at that point it would be time to go see a local therapist or counselor in an area near you, or perhaps an ADHD coach. That way you can get some help and find the steps necessary to get that on check, because it's really hard, especially when you're in a relationship. Because I've worked with people and I've seen people where both the members in the couple have ADHD, and they both have impulsivity problems, and it's tough too, because at that point, if there's trouble with finances and there's kids involved, the kids are going to struggle too. It's so unfortunate. So if this is an area of difficulty with one partner or both partners, it's something to talk about. And it's okay to talk about this. This is an ADHD issue because it deals with impulsivity. It deals with lack of organizational skills. And most of all, it deals with lack of executive function. So you look at the details that go into everything I just said, it's going to lead to the results of what we're talking about, which is financial problems. There's a lot of details that come to managing finances and keeping records and following up on those records, following up on bills at different areas there is to go. And when you got ADHD, it's really tough. It's rough. So we got to take care of the ADHD first. Now, if there's some resentment or some emotional wounds, we got to take care of that too. So I urge you to seek some guidance and some help if you need it. And then just choose to do nothing. And let the finances just keep crashing and let the family keep struggling and suffering. Because that's not fair to the rest of the family. Or to you. Give it a go. Take it one step at a time. I know it sounds like what I'm saying is just like, oh, you're saying, you're making it sound so easy. I don't know if I can do it. Well, for a lot of us, we only know life from the perspective of not getting help and not having our ADHD taken care of. So when you do get the ADHD taken care of, you perhaps seek treatment, you perhaps give supplements a try, you work with your healthcare professional, you work maybe with a therapist or counselor, something that works for the unique needs of you, the type of ADHD you have, whether that be inattentive combined or hyperactive. Take care of the ADHD. You can better take care of yourself. That way you and your partner, if you have a family, you all will be better off, ideally speaking, hopefully speaking. I hope you can make a change if you have an issue. Next point, hyposexual versus hypersexual. So I'm pretty sure, yet again, like I mentioned from the previous point, it's no secret that some people with ADHD have a libido that is sky high. I mean, good gracious, man. It's just like, I remember growing up around friends, both females and males, whose libidos were sky high because most of them had ADHD, hyperactive ADHD. But by the same token of the situation, we see that there are people who are hyposexual. These are people who have a very low libido and who don't have perhaps as much urge as people who are hypersexual. So amongst the ADHD community, there exist both. And I've worked with various inattentive types who have issues with a low libido, who are hyposexual, and their libido is quite low. So they don't really get the urge for intimacy as much. And what sucks is that this might rub the partner the wrong way or give the wrong message or might cause problems. Because the partner that is not hyposexual is going to think that perhaps there's something wrong with them maybe. And it's something that's difficult to discuss. So the reason why some people with ADHD, and from what I've seen those with inattentive ADHD sometimes, have a low libido or hyposexual is because there's a lack of B12. There's a gene mutation in one of the receptors of B12. So, what is recommended and what I've seen in research is to supplement with B12, particularly B12 methylcobalamin form. Methylcobalamin form of B12 is the most bioactive type of B12. Bioactive meaning the most similar to what our body already makes. So if you supplement with B12, that's going to help you out in that area, because B12 is involved with multiple other neurotransmitters that help you relax and feel at ease. Some people who are hyposexual complain that during their time they're being intimate, they feel very uncomfortable. The sheets rubbing against their skin, the friction just feels odd. The smells are uncomfortable for them. The positions that they're in, perhaps, like their bones feel brittle, their muscles hurt, things of that nature. The positions that they're in, they might feel really uncomfortable in. This might be due to lack of collagen as well. So they just want the whole experience to end really quick. And then sadly afterwards, due to the fact that some people with ADHD, especially inattentive ADHD, have a low reward system, well, guess what, man? That dopamine and that serotonin, once you release climax or reach climax, your neurotransmitters are going to go down, particularly serotonin and dopamine. And I've heard some people with inattentive ADHD mention that they feel really sad afterwards. They just want to go to sleep. They don't like how they feel. And again, this might send the wrong message to the other partner who doesn't have this problem. So what you can do with this is, perhaps after talking to your healthcare professional, consider B12 methylcobalamin form. I take personally 1,000 micrograms of B12 methylcobalamin form, and it helps me out in various areas, because B12, if you research B12, is involved in a lot of things that we need. People with ADHD also have an issue with the methylation process. I have a whole video that discusses diet, ADHD, and neurochemistry more in depth, and there should be a link above if you want to check that video out just a bit more. So, going on, people who are hypersexual are going to have the opposite problem where people who are hyposexual. People with ADHD who are hypersexual, they're going to be in the mood very frequently, and it's going to be almost like self-medication to some of them. They just want it so much because it brings up those neurotransmitters that people with ADHD lack. For example, dopamine, serotonin, and some other neurochemistry, neurotransmitters as well. So I just want to focus on those two, though. I don't want to get too deep into talking about neurochemistry. I got some other videos of that if you ever want to check them out. In terms of supplements, what we can do. There should be a link above for that too. So anyway, taking care of this too. This could be perhaps because your dopamine and your serotonin levels are perhaps also a bit lower. So in this case, what I've seen with a lot of people who are pure hyperactives, there seems to be a lot less serotonin in particular. And this makes the body really uncomfortable. So there's that need to constantly be moving. So anyway, going back to the high libido situation, people that have this issue might be dating or married to someone who doesn't have this issue, and the partner might feel like, okay, you know what, you're just using me for this is a little too much, what's going on, you know? So unfortunately, here's where some infidelity can come in too, because one partner might not be feeling like they're getting enough from their partner, and they might need to go get it elsewhere. And unfortunately, amongst the ADHD community, sometimes that can be quite common because we have neurochemistry imbalances. So what we need to do to avoid this being a problem, whether you're hyposexual or hypersexual, is taking care of your neurotransmitters that need to be taken care of, and perhaps supplementing with supplements that are going to help you out to balance out those neurochemistry imbalances. A hyposexual would benefit from taking B12 methylcobalamin form, and the same goes too for the hypersexual. Now, perhaps different dosages of certain supplements and perhaps treatment medication, if they're seeking that, would be helpful. There's a lot of other videos out there that talk about ADHD medication and the options that we have. I urge you to go search around YouTube for some of those videos. And if you're more interested in supplements too, along with medication, I have a couple of videos on that here on the channel as well that you might want to check out. Just because this is a tough subject matter. Some families have separated because of this, and they're not even aware that's an ADHD thing. So, if this is a problem that you have with your partner, talk to them about this in a non-judgmental way. Have an open mind. Perhaps even show them this video so they can see me, some random stranger, talking about it. And then hopefully they can see that it's not just an issue with you personally, but an issue with a lot of people with ADHD as well. That way the judgment goes down. You see that it's not a unique problem, but rather a problem that occurs across the span for a lot of people with ADHD. So, I hope you and your partner can talk about it. And if you have an issue with this, I hope you can work it out. Let's go to the next point. Point number 3. One partner might want to go out constantly, while the other might almost never want to go out. So, when the ADHD is not being taken care of, and then when you have someone who might be an extrovert, who might have hyperactive ADHD or might have combined type ADHD, more so on the hyperactive side, they're going to want to be going out more frequently because they like the stimulation of being out and about, going to different places, and it kind of drives them up, so to speak. So some people with ADHD they get exhausted quite easily. Once they get home from work, they just want to relax and they don't want to go anywhere. And if they got inattentive ADHD, I can almost assure you that once they get home from work, it's like, I'm going to get home, I'm going to sit down, I'm not going to get back up, and then I'm going to relax, and then I'm going to knock out. Because if you have an intensive ADHD, it's like there's this slow drudgery you carry with you throughout the day. It's like a constant feeling of being tired, unfortunately. Now, this is due to various reasons in your neurochemistry and certain neurotransmitters being low. So, anyway, though, what I'm trying to get at here is that there's different reasons, perhaps, why somebody might want to go out constantly and why the other partner might want to only go out every once in a while. In this regard, we have to meet in the middle. And if both members of the relationship have ADHD, we have to be considerate of the needs of our partner. There is some people with ADHD who need time to be by themselves and just reflect and relax. And there's other people who have ADHD who might never want to be alone and always just be on the go. So we got to learn to understand each other. We got to learn how to be considerate to each other and then balance it out. Perhaps on certain weekends, you can go out with your significant other and go somewhere. Or perhaps to a place that, works for both of you. And then other weekends where you can just stay at home and perhaps do an activity together or have your self-care alone time. It's okay. We're all really different here. So, perhaps that should be something you should talk about if you have this issue, because this is an issue I've seen with certain couples where one person is gung-ho and always wants to go out and the other partner is like, can we please just relax? I've been going to work, going crazy all week. I just want to relax and chill. So, we got to meet in the middle. We got to listen and be aware of our health and our body when it's talking to us. We shouldn't have to push ourselves all the time. So, let's be understanding, let's be considerate, and let's discuss what needs to be discussed in this regard. I hope you guys can talk it out. Let's go to the next point. Number 4, impulsive decision making. In combination with rejection-sensitive dysphoria, emotional tantrums, and manipulation. This is tying back to point number 1. Remember we were talking about financial problems and impulses and whatnot and what that does when a person just can't help but buy something or go somewhere and spend a bunch of money? Unfortunately, due to trauma from ADHD over childhood, there's some unresolved trauma that some people have that comes out when they're older. They're not really aware of it. This is when you see perhaps an older adult, throwing a temper tantrum like a child, much like we see a lot in the media these days. But that's a different story. So anyway, though, the impulsive decision making sometimes has some emotions attached to it, and one partner might feel their rejection sensitive dysphoria get hit when they make a decision and their other partner doesn't believe them or that it's the right decision or it should be something that they're doing. So, quick recap for those of us who don't know, rejection sensitive dysphoria is something that people with ADHD have to deal with. A lot of people with ADHD have to deal with rejection sensitive dysphoria. This is something that is due to our heightened central nervous system, where when we feel like we have disappointed somebody, or we have let ourselves down by not accomplishing a goal or something we needed to do, or when we feel like we've let somebody down, or like someone let us down and they didn't come through for us when we were there for them all the time and they couldn't come to that one thing. They couldn't be there for us when we needed them. These feelings are really intense. It can carry a lot of anger, resentment, and sadness, and melancholy that lasts days or hours. And you just don't want to see that person or go to that place again. So going back into impulse problems, what happens with some people is that when they impulsively buy something and put the rest of the family in financial constraints, and there's the rest of the family's going to have to suffer, this individual might not want to bear the brunt of this. The individual with ADHD with the impulsive problem who caused the rest of the family a financial problem might not have the emotional stamina to be able to deal with that. So they're going to either start blaming other people, they're going to start being intense, and they're going to forbid the conversation from being talked about. They're going to avoid it at all costs. And that's usually due to rejection sensitive dysphoria. They don't have the emotional capacity yet to be able to deal with that. Because perhaps when they were growing up, they were shown almost no mercy when they messed up. When they did something wrong, even in the slightest way perhaps, they got told some really bad things. Perhaps they were hit. Perhaps they grew up in a really strict environment where love was only shown when things were accomplished. Or unfortunately, in some cases, one or both of the parents, they gaslight the kids. By that, I mean that they tell them things just to get them riled up and intense and make them feel ashamed and bad, and they just keep ramping it up just to shame them. What happens when this occurs is that as an adult, this child who's gone through that, they're going to have a much harder time admitting their mistakes because they're going to feel the same way they felt back in the day. And they unconsciously think that that's going to happen to them again. So if this is the case, if you have a family member that's really intense and doesn't like to own up to their financial problems or bad decisions that they've made, perhaps it's time to discuss rejection sensitive dysphoria with them. I have a whole video on rejection sensitive dysphoria if you want to check it out. It should be above, where it discusses so many of the scars that we have because of feeling like we've let ourselves down, our family members down, our friends down over and over again. Or where we feel like other people have let us down over and over again, and like we go out of our way for people, but they don't back for us. And that's a horrible feeling. Both of those scenarios are terrible things to feel. So let's get to know our rejection sensitive dysphoria. If you got it, so you can reflect on it, and you can see that it's okay to talk about your flaws and problems. It's not going to be the end of the world. Those mean or intense people, whoever they were in your life that made you feel like that when you were a kid, they're not going to be around. It's going to be your family. It's going to be people that care about you, ideally speaking. And if you can't do that with some of your own family members because it's too tough perhaps, find yourself a social support system in a community that you like. Somewhere near you perhaps. Not having a social support system can be really damaging. So I urge you to go look for that. Be open to talk about rejection-sensitive dysphoria. It's not fair to the rest of the family that one family member keeps making mistakes and they can't be approached about it because they'll lose their crap, so to speak, and they'll get really intense and upset. This is due to rejection-sensitive dysphoria and unresolved trauma most of the time from our past life. So, and if it's too intense, then perhaps counseling might be necessary. Look for a therapist, counselor, or maybe even an ADHD coach in your area, if you need to. Let's be open to discussion. You can certainly make the change. Let's go to the next point. For the next couple of points 5 through 7, I'm going to be discussing cognitive functions and how they play an impact into a relationship and family. And for the next couple of points number 5 through 7, we're going to be getting our information from Molly Owens and the gang over there at Trudy.com. Link down below if you want to check more out. So let's jump on to the first point number 5, thinking versus feeling type. Thinking types. Thinkers make decisions rationally, based on facts and objective criteria, and use logical analysis to solve problems. They like to have very clear rules about what is right and what is wrong, and dislike fuzziness. They value the truth, justice, and fairness above all. Work environments that are not meritocracies can be very challenging for them. People with this preference are motivated by achievement and the accomplishment of specific tasks. They like work that requires order, critical analysis, or finding inconsistencies in a system. They are often frustrated by the people part of life, self-selecting into work areas and situations that place emphasis on rules and logic over people and feelings. Interactions with a thinker tend to be blunt and businesslike. They step back from emotional problems in favor of offering an impersonal analysis, truth over fact, logic over feelings. Once a decision is made, it is made, and the thinker will not dwell on emotions about it. They can come across as rather cold and unemotional in their approach. Now, granted, this is just a foundation of what a thinking type might be. We have to understand that there's different levels of this. There's some thinking types that are very emotionally inclined or very emotionally mature and informed. So this varies, and a person can certainly become much more of a feeling type or of a thinking type. I believe each of the core functions of the core letters can change in life because of behavior, because of discipline, because of intense life scenarios and other life scenarios. We can certainly change many different aspects of ourselves. I don't believe that you're born, you got these cognitive functions and you can't change them. Absolutely not. We can definitely refine ourselves, and improve. So that is the thinking type function. Let's move on now to the feeling type function. Let me preface this by saying that this feeling type function definition here is not the end-all, be-all encompassing facet of feeling types, but rather just a good foundational definition. And there are certainly some feeling types that come off more like thinking types, and it varies in ratios and percentages based off the individual, their upbringing, the nature of the nurture, and things of that nature. So please don't think I'm being put into the box and all that schnaz, because you're not. So anyway, feeling types. Feelers make decisions based on the personal value system and social considerations. They pay attention to their own moral compass and the feelings of others to determine right from wrong, and are less interested in the cold, hard facts. Connections and relationships are incredibly important to them. People with this preference are motivated by the desire to understand and help people. They choose work based on what or who is important to them, and they like to support others. They tend to be amiable, empathetic, and harmonious. They are often frustrated by the impersonal and adversarial parts of life and find conflict situations very challenging. Interacting with a feeler tends to be personal and tactful. They step back from the facts of a situation in favor of someone's experience of it. Tact over truth, feelings over logic. Feelers consider the effect of their actions on other people and feel unappreciated in settings that do not provide positive reinforcement. So, in couples, sometimes we have somebody who has the thinking type function and somebody else who has the feeling type function. And what ends up happening is they just end up basically trolling the living daylights out of each other, or whatever word you want to use, triggering or just pissing them off. Yeah, they just keep saying perhaps the wrong things, and they're not aware that what they're saying might be really pissing off, upsetting their partner. So once we know our cognitive functions and see the details of ourselves and learn about ourselves and our inadequacies and difficulties, we can really start improving ourselves. And once we know that of our partner, we know their cognitive functions, we can be considerate and start being helpful of them. And vice versa. They can do that for us as well. So I've been around quite a bit of people that I've seen have immense fights because of this. Because feeling types are like, how could you say that? How could you think this? Do you not consider fill in the blank or this? And then the thinking type is like, well, it's a matter of situation, matter of person. You can't lump everything into the same category and expect the same results and empathy from everyone. It doesn't work like that. So both points have their validation. They just come from different perspectives. Now, we need to learn to balance out these functions as we're learning in society right now. It's a battle of thinking and feelings, as it feels like a lot of the time. And the media is doing a shit job of stirring people up because of it to drive their agenda. So, we need to be careful not to let people, the media, and other places in life gaslight us, whether we're thinking types or feeling types. Because the people in charge, folks, they know all about cognitive functions and human psychology and human nature. So they know how to make people do things that they want them to do. We got to be careful because of this. We're not going to allow people to treat us like a guinea pig, you know? And I know a lot of people mean good. Absolutely. We got to stand up for ourselves and stand up for some people, for some situations, but not at the expense of neglecting our health and neglecting the ADHD, letting our family down. If you are a mother or father, and you have kids, that's a responsibility right there. You got to be careful to understand each other. Whatever type of relationship dynamic you have, the relationship model is so variety filled. There's people of different types getting together. There was one time in history where there was an issue with people of certain cultures getting together, of certain gender and sex orientations getting together, but thankfully stuff has opened up. We used to live in a really judgmental time where certain people couldn't be together for various reasons, but thankfully stuff has opened up now. People's minds have opened up, and they're starting to. And for some people, it's little by little, and for some people, it's quite a bit, almost too much. It totally depends. So, the point is, though, we're living in a much more understanding time. So, as a couple, we got to try to understand ourselves, our significant other, a lot more. So, when these discussions come up, it's important to talk about why you feel or why you think a certain way, and not be so intense and judgmental of the other person. I've worked with a lot of feeling types. I am a thinker. I'm a letter T in my own cognitive function. And I've been around a lot of places where I see people get into some intense arguments. And don't get me wrong, I see feeling types getting in many arguments with other feeling types too. And same thing with thinking types. I see many thinking types get into immense arguments with other thinking types. There's some couples where one's a feeling type, the other one's a thinking type. And there's some couples where both of them are feeling types. Other couples, both of them are thinking types. So it totally depends. And the ratio and percentages and balances of this all really depend on the individual and the individual couple as well. We cannot generalize here. So the point being is we have to see where we're coming from. And we have to work together. A lot of the time, you'd be surprised, we want the same thing. It's just we're saying it differently, and it's pissing the partner or somebody else off, but we want the same thing. So there needs to be room for discussion. That's the only way we're going to get anywhere, folks. We need to be open to discuss these things. And we need to be open to the idea that we might be wrong or ill-informed about certain things, or might need further information. So you gotta be humble. You gotta learn to be humble. Learn to accept notions that are perhaps different. We need to reflect. We need to get intuitive. Another cognitive function we shall be talking about. So I hope this point was of some help. Let's jump to the next point in cognitive functions. We have the judging type. Versus the perceiver. Judging types. Judgers approach life in a structured, organized, and carefully calibrated way, creating short and long-term plans to help them achieve their goals. Schedules and to-do lists are comforting to them. They prefer knowing what they are getting into and feel frustrated in situations of ambiguity and change. People with this preference gain a sense of control by taking charge of their environment. They are self-disciplined and decisive, going for closure at the earliest possible opportunity to avoid stress. Judgers have a work-first, play-later mindset and struggle with open-ended plans. They would rather come up with 3 different contingencies than deal with problems as and when they arise. At work and in life, judges take their responsibilities and deadlines very seriously. They are very specific about what they need to get done, and they expect others to do as they say. They can come across as domineering and inflexible, but it's all driven by a need to operate in a structured setting. So, TLDR, type A people. So, anyway. Pretty much kind of what it comes down to when you really think about it. But yeah, there's a sense of a lot of organization. Don't get me wrong, there's some judging types who are extremely disorganized for various reasons. That's not to say that perceivers are extremely unorganized either. I'm telling you, it depends on the person, depends on the situation here. We're not putting anybody into a box. Alright, so keep it cool. Alright, so those are judging types, a foundation of judging types, okay? So let's move on down to the perceiving types. So, perceivers approach life in a free-willing, spontaneous way, preferring to keep their options open than make a clear plan of action. They perceive structure as limiting and seek flexibility in their lives. They like adapting to new situations and feel frustrated by the daily grind of routines. People with this preference gain a sense of control by making choices only when they are necessary. Very important point. They view deadlines as elastic and often put off decision-making until the last possible moment so they can spend as much time as possible exploring new options. They would rather start a new project than close down an old one, as making a decision requires them to commit to something that may well turn out to be the inferior choice. At work and in life, perceivers are relaxed and adaptable. They enjoy life now and work later and are always scanning the horizon for new options and opportunities. They can come across as unreliable and flaky, but it's all driven by a need to keep their options open. Again, this does not define all perceivers. There's a good balance out there, and this is just a nice foundational definition. So, TLDR, perceivers, type B people. I don't know. So anyway, yes, this is a really important function. It is the fourth letter in cognitive functions. It is the J or the P function in cognitive functions. So, if one member in the relationship is a J and the other one's a P, yeah, there's going to be quite a bit of adaptability struggles, especially if one member is really unbalanced in that cognitive function. So if you have a really, really anal type B person, rather a J, if you will, perhaps. So it might get a little tough when you got a really sort of anal judging type person living with a really lazy, unorganized perceiver. And there might be a lot of fights because of this and bickering and all this and that. So what we need to do is, again, we need to find the middle ground. We need to find balance. Because with both skills, with both cognitive functions, comes a different skill set that is very needed. There's some perceivers who could benefit really well from being with a significant other with the J function, because they can help organize them and help get a routine going and be a good assistance. And the other way around, a perceiver can be of great help to somebody of the J function who really is overworking themselves and doesn't see the areas where they can make some changes, and they can sometimes wait to gain more information in order to gain further insight into what's needed. Both cognitive functions bring so much to the table. And guess what, folks? Depending on what type of job you got, one of those letters is going to be more necessary than the other one. In some gigs, you're going to have both of those bad boys on check and balanced. So same thing goes for the couple in their relationship. So there's some households where both parents are perceivers and they got ADHD. And if both parents got inattentive ADHD, forget about it. That house is going to be a mess of a nightmare. And there's going to be a lot of late fill in the blank, more than likely. Now, if you have a household where everyone's at the J function and it's really unbalanced, that is going to be a very pristine, almost militaristic run house where, unfortunately, everything is going to look great, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of perhaps misery and negativity and just resentment and a lot of stuff that needs to be talked about that's not. So that's just one example. But having both the letters unbalanced is going to bring a ton of problems. So we need to balance out those functions and see what we can do depending on what cognitive function you have. I got a whole video on cognitive functions, individuals, and relationships. There should be a link above, so you should check those out. One of them talks about the individual struggles of every personality type of the 16, and that's not to say there's just 16. Those are just the foundations. There's billions and billions of iterations for those of you who don't like to feel like you're boxed into something. You're not, okay? So I would recommend to watch one of those videos to see what your cognitive functions are. Should be a link to a task down below. Find out, and then I recommend you watch the video to learn what the struggles of ADHD and what it brings forth. And then I'm also working on an ADHD relationship series. And I'm also working on an ADHD relationship series of cognitive functions. As of today, as of May 1st, so far the INFJ, INTJ, they are what's known as NI-DOMs. Their relationship videos up. So if you're dating an INFJ or INTJ with ADHD, you can go check that out. It's on my channel. And if you're dating a INFP or ISFP, yeah, the cognitive functions of ADHD with that relationship is also up. So I'm working on getting the other ones down. Stay tuned. It takes quite some time, but I like what I do. So anyways, continuing on. We need to find balance in this regard, because if we don't, there's going to be a lot of constant fights and a lot of constant bickering. The kids are going to feel really sad. They're going to feel like, why are my parents constantly at each other's throats? I want to leave. I want to go somewhere else. And guess what? If one parent has ADHD, there's a 75% chance that one of the kids might have ADHD as well. So, and if both the parents got ADHD, well, unfortunately, yeah, there's going to be ADHD involved. And if you adopted a kid, well, then at that point, it's a different story. They might not have ADHD, but still, if both parents have ADHD and there's a lot of struggling going on, yeah, it's really going to put a damper on the rest of the home and the family. So let's talk. Let's be open to discussion. Let's find out more about ourselves and our cognitive functions. Let's keep that perceiver and that judging function balanced out and on check, and let's refine it. I hope you can find some help with that.